Thank you for being here, everybody, and welcome. Good afternoon in Berlin and good morning in Panama. My name is Ela Spalding. I am an artist facilitator, founder, and director of Estudio Nuboso. It's an art and ecology platform based in Panama with clouds of action in places such as Berlin, where I am based. Together with my colleague, Emily Zhukov, who's a sculptor, artist, and educator, founding member and facilitator with Estudio Nuboso, we are hosting this conversation today. And it's a very special treat to have you all gathered here. I would like to thank the Berlin Science Week, Nico and Anicia especially, for providing this space for exchange in various fields of science and knowledge, and especially with the focus on art and science collaboration through the forum this year. And while we're gathered digitally across borders and across the ocean to talk about a very special circumstance, which is the 100th anniversary of ongoing tropical research on Barro Colorado Island, a station of the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, STRI, which was created in Panama around the time that the Panama Canal was built. And this place hosts the longest ongoing conversation on tropical research in the world. And as part of the various celebrations that STRI has organized, we, Estudio Nuboso, were invited to design and facilitate an art and science residency on Barro Colorado Island last May, and share the results within a really wonderful exhibition that is currently on until January 2024 in the Museo del Canal Interoceánico in Panama City, in case you happen to be there. And it is with the participants of this residency and the people involved in it that we are in dialogue today. So allow me to introduce our speakers. Beth King, who is one of the designers of the exhibition that was initially in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., and then now currently in Panama. Beth is a science interpreter at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, an enthusiastic science and conservation communicator dedicated to inspiring curiosity and celebrating discoveries about life and tropical ecosystems. We have Olivia Milloway, researcher and science communicator, interested in telling stories about the natural world through sound. And if you visit our website at the moment, where we have an online exhibition about the Art and Science Residency, you will hear her sound works. Olivia previously earned a Bachelor's of Science in Biology and Environmental Sciences at Emory University, and created, produced, and edited Sea to Trees, Acadia National Park's official narrative science podcast. She is currently a Fulbright student grantee at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in Panama City. As for the artists and scientists, we have Isabel De Obaldía, who studied architecture at the University of Panama and drawing at l'École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. In 1979, she received her BFA in graphic design and film from the Rhode Island School of Design. Since her first exhibition in 1977, Isabel De Obaldía has participated in biennials, fairs, symposiums, and international exhibitions. In 2009, she received the Corning Museum of Glass Racco Commission Award. 2011, she held a retrospective at the Fort Lauderdale Museum of Art. And in recent years, Isabel has created videos and animations, two of which, Por Panama la Vida and Diario 2020, were selected and exhibited at the 58th Carnegie International. Is it morning for you yet? Is another work of Isabel's. That was exhibited at the 58th Carnegie International, and Isabel lives and works in Panama. Isabel collaborated with Rachel Page, who is a staff scientist at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. She's based in Gamboa, Panama, and leads a large and vibrant group of researchers from all over the world, investigating sensory and cognitive ecology through the study of the behavior of neotropical bats. Carolina Borrero is audiovisual director and part of the Animal Film Collective based in Panama City. She studied film direction in the Universidad del Cine in Buenos Aires and has an extensive career in short films, among which stands out a chapter in the titled 1913 in the film Historias del Canal, and the documentary Los Cuentos del Bosque, She's also collaborated with Estudio Nuboso as a documentarian and artist for the last 10 years, and she's currently directing her first documentary feature called La Selva Llama. She collaborated with various scientists, some of which are the Forest Geo Plots, the Forest Global Earth Observatory, which is a global network of scientists and forest research sites dedicated to advancing long-term study of the world's forests, and also particularly with the arthropods in that team. And she also collaborated with Klaus Winter, who we have on this call as well, on the Tropical Dome Project. And Klaus is a senior scientist, plant physiology laboratory in the Plant Physiology Laboratory in Smithsonian Tropical in the STRI. The Winter Lab studies how tropical plants, particularly trees, function and interact with their environment. The Tropical Dome Project is focused on how tropical forests will respond to a warmer climate with higher concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This lab seeks an answer by growing plants in geodesic domes. Isabel Brostella is a landscape architect. She seeks to build landscapes capable of altering the imposed lines and creating new ones that improve their ecological and cultural conditions over time. Her works raise awareness about elements that seem intangible but have a greater impact on the territory. She believes that everything is connected and influences how we live, and she lives and works in Panama City. She collaborated with Dr. Erin Spear, who's a staff scientist at STRI. The research conducted in her lab intersects disease ecology, who gets sick from what, where, and why, mycology, the study of fungi, and community ecology, how different species and the environment interact, and how do those interactions shape a community. Welcome again, and thank you. I would just like to start by reading a short text quote by Dr. Anthony Coates, who was a geologist who worked for STRI for many years and collaborated with us in Estudio Nuboso in 2014 in our first pilot project. And so these words that I'm saying are from an audio that we recorded in that experience we had with him. And he says, the most amount of technical knowledge, political will, financial capacity is in the temperate world, while the vast majority of all the diversity of life is in the tropical world. How the hell do we get those two realms together? He went on to say that he's super proud of working in STRI because it's one of the few places where top-notch scientists are able to live in the ecosystem that they're researching. And he goes on to say about Panama, that Panama is smack in the middle of the tropics, and it is extraordinary in its natural history. Just to give you a few examples, Panama is about the size of South Carolina. It has more species of trees and birds in Panama than in the whole of the USA and Canada combined. So here is not just the size that counts. Here in Panama, if you cut 100 square meters of forest, you do vastly more damage than if you cut 100 square meters of forest in Alberta. So when you think about how societies operate in their territories, the land use and so on, it's crucial to get the science right. He says, it's incredible how little we know about the tropics, given the discrepancy described before about all of the knowledge and resources being in the north versus in the tropics. And in 2014, Tony already mentioned how the mining companies were coming into Panama to build massive copper mines, and that there was a lack of geologists locally to properly advise the government on such decisions. This is just to give us a little bit of context in this conversation about the importance and the urgency of researching the tropics, and in these contexts, given the global environmental crisis and given the current mining crisis that is a fight that is happening in Panama, where Panamanians have been closing streets and roads and protesting for more than 2 weeks to change national governmental policies that have been betting on mining as our income for the future rather than the biodiversity of Panama. So I would like to just kick off the conversation, and thanks for bearing with me with this long intro, but I would like to kick off the conversation by asking Beth and the scientists, what is the importance of such long-term scientific research in the tropics, both for the tropics and the Panama and the research itself, but also for the on the global scale? And perhaps you could start it off, Beth, and then pass on the word to the other scientists in the room. And feel free to raise your hand and to speak when you need.
Oh, good morning, everyone. And thank you, Ela and Estudio Nuboso, for organizing this, and also for organizing the residency for celebrating 100 years on Barro Colorado. It's really important work that you've done, and we're really grateful that you're doing this work. It makes a huge difference in terms of the way the public is able to perceive the BCI's 100th birthday. In terms of we were lucky at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute that we have been doing research in the tropics for the last 100 years, and it's very unusual. It's one of the very few places in the tropics where such work is being done. Not only does it give, both tropical forests and tropical reef environments, which are some of the most biodiverse on Earth, are exceedingly complex. And in order to understand the processes involved, it takes years not only to figure out what organisms are present, but how they interact and how they interact under different environmental conditions. And so because environmental conditions can continually change, it's essential for people to keep coming back. And in fact, the fact that this is a government project allows sort of long-term monitoring. I think we have probably the longest rainfall data and climate data set available from probably maybe not any tropical site in the world, but there are very few data sets like this. And what happens is it's a matter of serendipity, so that scientists pursue topics that are interesting to them and to themselves, and we never really know what's going to be important in the future. So this kind of curiosity-driven science is extremely important. And then what happens is that something comes up, like, for example, climate change, and people start calling the communications office and asking, is there someone there who can speak about climate? And for example, this year, you may have seen in the news that the Panama Canal is imposing draft restrictions on boats, because this is one of the driest years that's ever been recorded on Barro Colorado Island. And we have the sort of long-term data to be able to say that. So there are other things that are also really important that have been discovered that have to do with long-term studies. For example, there were long-term studies of, or are long-term studies of birds on Barro Colorado Island. And from those studies, people realized that forests really need to be intact, and birds need to be able to move from place to place within the forest, so that when you break up the forest by road construction or by creating islands of forest on a landscape, and I'm not talking about islands in a lake, and in this case, the island is in a lake, but it's also true when a patch of forest is isolated, that it really results in species decline. And that's something that's conservationists are using around the world to design reserves that make sense, because the pieces of forest are large enough to support a full population of organisms, and also and also allow movement between different islands or between different forests, which is essential for the survival of these organisms. And then also the other thing that happens when you have such a long-term study is that you begin to put together many pieces of a puzzle. So there's there's so much work when someone comes to study what monkeys eat or leadership among monkey groups on Barro Colorado, they don't have to start from zero. They can just look up in a book what species of plants are there, and they can when a monkey's holding a fruit, they can say what this fruit is without starting from scratch, as they would have to do in many other places. So this kind of long-term research is essential, and I will let Erin, Klaus, and Rachel speak about what's happening in their fields.
Thank you, Beth. And it would be great if we can also just intertwine your experience, this question of like, what has been your experience of working at STRI and being able to do this long-term research, and perhaps link it at some point with your respective artist that you collaborated with during the residency. So perhaps, since Beth mentioned climate change, perhaps Klaus, you would like to speak about your dome project?
Okay, I was able to switch on the camera. I mean, I don't have much to add to what Beth said about the importance of long-term studies. I just want to say that trees are long-lived, 100 years, 200 years. It isn't enough to study just seedlings. You have to study them from germination to the end. Otherwise, you don't learn anything about, let's say, carbon sequestration, tree diversity. And in terms of climate change, there's ongoing concurrent climate change. It's anthropogenic climate change is caused by us. Ups and downs in atmospheric CO2 and associated changes in temperature and precipitation patterns are not new. They have occurred many times throughout past geological areas over time scales of millions of years, long enough for plants to adapt or to migrate. But today's human-induced atmospheric and climate change is different. It occurs so rapidly that trees experience massive increases in CO2 concentration and temperature during their lifetimes. And this is, of course, for a plant biologist like me, a fascinating scenario, studying species-rich, high biomass tropical forests that are the major driver of the global carbon cycle. And the big question, of course, how will tropical forests respond to increases in atmospheric CO2 and increasing in temperatures? CO2 is good for plants because CO2 is their food. Plants use CO2 in a process called photosynthesis to grow, and that's why commercial plant growers, many commercial plant growers inject artificial CO2 into their growing houses to make tomatoes grow faster, and so on. But the problem is that associated with CO2, which is good, is an increase in temperature, which is not so good. And the big question is, how will tropical forests that already live in a warm world respond to increasing temperatures? Will they go extinct, or will they make it? Of course, it depends how much temperatures in the tropics will rise. And there are two ways to study this. You can monitor tree growth. You can do long-term monitoring of tree growth, for example, on Barro Colorado Island or in other forests, and you will know exactly which plant germinates and recruits and which plant dies. So you learn a lot about forest turnover, and in 100 to 200 years we will know how climate change has affected tropical forests. The problem is there's no control. We don't have a piece of forest that's maintained under current ambient conditions. And that's why we have the climate domes. That's why, and in those climate domes, we create possible future scenarios. So we grow tropical plants under elevated CO2 concentrations, twice current ambient concentrations. We increase the temperature by 5 degrees. This is far more than plants in Panama and the tropics will experience in the near future. So we use very extreme conditions to learn more about the climate envelope within which tropical plants are able to exist. If these plants make it with +5 degrees, they will make it also with +3 degrees. So that's why we are doing these experiments. The problem is, there's no problem, but the limitation we have is our tropical trees are very tall. Our domes have a height of 3.5 meters. So we study tree saplings. That's better than studying just tree seedlings, which has been done in the past. So we are getting closer to mature trees. We will also study reproduction, because some trees do reproduce when they don't need to be 20 meters tall in order to reproduce. So it's not just about whether plants can grow vegetatively as CO2 and temperature increase, but whether the question is also whether they can reproduce. And if you study reproduction, because many tropical trees are pollinated by insects, you also need to include bees, stingless bees, and so on. So the system is fairly complex, but we are trying to study it. Again, ideally, we would need much, much larger domes, and that's basically a question of getting appropriate funding. But right now, we are happy with our relatively medium-sized domes, and we can do fully replicated experiments. And we will get answers whether elevated temperatures together with elevated CO2 concentrations will be damaging the tropical forests, or whether tropical trees are less susceptible to these changes than some people think. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Klaus. Could you speak to the collaboration that you had with the artist Carolina Borrero Arias, who's also here with us today? And perhaps, share with us.
Well, it's always
the role that of the experience you had with speaking with the artist, and perhaps the role that you might see in art to support your research or to support the funding of your research coming through, if that were a possibility, for example, or just your experience.
I like art. I started I was a violinist in my youth, and I have lots of paintings in my apartment, also by Panamanian artists. And I'm of course always happy when somebody is interested in my research. And I was very happy that, for example, Carolina was interested in it and came to Gamboa to see the experimental setup and to do some movie making. I'm still trying to figure out our reunion here and what the whole project will eventually lead to, but I'm curious, and that's why I'm trying to help out. Carolina, what do you have? What's your impression? I still haven't made a suggestion what to do. I'm thinking about it continuously, what to put into this time box.
What I could add to what Klaus just said is that I think for me, my project is still germinating, like it's still in a phase of having of growing. So I think it's little right now, but with the conversation I had with Klaus and then with the arthropod team, what I got out of that is the time, like the time frames that are different, but like how the time of a tree is different from the time of an insect, and how we have as humans relate with the scale of time, depending on the cycles of each organism. And for me, it was really important to understand, like, or to know that trees and humans, we have a really similar span of generations. Like a generation of a tree is similar of a generation of a human. But for example, with the insects, in 1 year they could have 3 or 4 generations of a family of insects. So, but the relationship and of the time we live as humans with the time that trees take to grow and mature and be fully developed, for me was something really important to know and to understand, because that gave me some kind of peace of not being like in a hurry all the time. Like I think we are living like our lives are as we are insects, but actually we are more related with trees. So with that conversation and with that experience, I'm having like a more easy time myself, not being in a hurry all the time, and taking things with calm and with time that takes to grow fully.
Thank you, Caro, for sharing that insight. Since we're talking about, well, time, could you just mention, Caro, briefly about your time capsule project? And I think it's still open for suggestions. As Klaus said, there's still space to add things. Could you just mention that a bit more?
Yeah, of course. Part of the idea of my project, of my collaboration, is to plant a time capsule in Barro Colorado, probably next year. And there's a prototype in the Museo del Canal that already has some sharing. And for me, this idea is to connect. Like right now, the island has 100 years of history of research, and my idea is with this time capsule to put some message, some information that people in the next 100 years, when the island is 200 years old of investigations, can open it and see what was happening in this moment, what was going through our minds, and what was some of the things that we saved from this 100 years for the next 100 years. So I've been sharing this question of what would you put in a time capsule to be open in the next 100 years, to the scientists of STRI, to the team here of Estudio Nuboso, and also to the visitors of the museum, including kids and all kinds of visitors. So currently we have some books in the time capsule. We have some letters. We have letters from kids, poems from kids. We have a drawing from Isabel De Obaldía, and well, we are open for any piece of information, memory, hope, whatever you want to put in this time capsule. And right now it's just a prototype. The idea of thinking, what would I like to share with the people from the future? It's a hard question, because we can go to the gloomy side, or we can go to the, well, I don't know what's going to happen in the next 100 years, but imagining, like just the act of imagining what's going to happen in some people in 100 years, I think it's really important.
Thank you, Caro. Emily?
Yeah, I think this is a really good opportunity to mention to those of us who are joining us who haven't been part of this project in the last few months, that there is an exhibition at the Museo del Canal, Interoceánico, where these artists have different artworks, installations, and maybe we could have Isabel Brostella talk about her collaboration with Erin and the installation that she created for the museum as part of that. Oh, and with Hernan too, of course.
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. Is Hernan here? I don't think so. Well, for the installation we did, we were trying to talk about soil and start, I don't know, allowing people to start thinking about these interactions that most of them don't know that exist and take place on a daily basis, and how this could make us then respect it a little more and have a better relationship with it. That was like the goal that I was trying to get at when we were starting to thinking about this. I think the interaction between like trees and mycelium was the first thing, but then when I met Erin and we started talking about a lot of things, pathogens started to come up, and I started also like integrating this to our main concept, because there are so many dynamics happening, and how pathogens, for instance, something that I learned from Hernan actually was that not all of them are negative, and that they also contribute to diversity. So mixing this and I don't know, creating the piece that is a living one that has actually changed throughout the time it has been exhibited, was what we were aiming to do. I don't know, Erin, if you want to add something to that.
Sure. I agree with your summary of sort of like what our conversations encompassed in terms of like thinking about how everything's interconnected and how roles are not always clear, or when we can't necessarily put organisms into boxes and say that they're good or bad. And I think those were really important lessons, are generally really important lessons for all of us that we should extend to various aspects of our lives. And I think I also wanted to touch a little bit on how powerful it was for me to interact and work with you in ways that I didn't necessarily anticipate. So I'd like to speak a little bit about that. I'm going to back up and just say that for people on the call that as Ela mentioned, I'm a staff scientist at the Smithsonian, and my work focuses on the interactions between trees and fungi, especially pathogenic fungi. Isabel mentioned that as well. And we know virtually nothing about these fungi. I mean, it's really kind of staggering, which for early career scientists is phenomenal. I mean, we have amazing job security because there are literally decades worth of research left to be done. And it's so intriguing and exciting in that way. And just to give you an idea of what we know and don't know, we think there are about 2 to 11 million fungi on the planet. And only 150,000 of them have been formally identified by science, and only 2,000 of those 150,000 have been identified in Panama. And as Ela mentioned during her discussion of Tony Coates' quote, that Panama is the center of biodiversity. So if we only know 2,000 of the fungi that are here, there's so much to be learned. And I think that ties into this conversation about how powerful it is to be in a place with 100 years of research. For me, I have the wonderful opportunity to put everything that I do in the context of that 100 years of research, and science is cumulative. We don't do science in isolation, and all of us stand on the shoulders of the people that came before us, and we draw inspiration and knowledge from those people. So I think that for me, that there is no place on earth like BCI for just that reason right there. And in terms of working with Isabel, there was something that she said to me that it seems so obvious, but I think I take it for granted, which is this idea that like often scientists, and especially scientists, it seems like trained in North America, get this idea of nature being separate from themselves. And even though like I think of myself as interconnected with nature, and I love this quote that we contain multitudes and the forest contains multitude. I mean, they're like fungi and bacteria, our biomass is more microorganisms than it is our own biomass. So it's like this idea that we're separate from it is obviously false, but being reminded of our interconnectedness with the natural world is really powerful. And as I reflected on that conversation with Isabel, I started to think about BCI as its own being, with its own history and constantly changing story, that and this idea that we're in the longest conversation in history, that really it's BCI that's driving that conversation, and the data that we collect are as BCI telling us its story and revising its story, and we are learning about new chapters in its life. And it also made me think about this quote from the Navajo culture that I love, which is that you can't know where you're going if you don't know who you are. And if you don't know where you're going, you're lost. And I think, look, for us as tropical ecologists and people who care about climate change, knowing BCI is so powerful, because that's how we know tropical forests. And if we can understand tropical forests, we can at least have some idea where tropical forests are going. And then in that sense, we can mitigate at least some of the effects of climate change and hopefully prevent others. So yeah, Isabel, I mean, we interacted much less than I had hoped that we could have, but I took so much away from my time with you, and I really have reflected on it continuously since. So thank you so much for that time and inspiration.
Oh yeah, thank you. It was beautiful, like the collaboration. I loved it, and I loved also like having all of these discussions with you, and also with Hernan. It was really, really nice. And yeah, I mean, I could add to what you're saying. I just don't know if there's a lot of time. Like, should I add? Like, I just wanted to say, like, so I'm a landscape architect. Like, just to give context a little bit to what Erin was saying, I work with plants, and every day, like I was just planting a site. So in these early like interactions I have with it, I realized that even the people that are planting the plants don't really have a relationship with it. They see it like this is a garden, or that's nature, and I'm separate. So I don't know, I think that, I don't know, we're all way more connected, and I don't know, I guess I try to collaborate with scientists in every project that I do, precisely to, I don't know, make landscapes that are even more, that are, I don't know, responding to a space. Because as humans, I think we can contribute to that. There's a landscape architect that I love that is called J.B. Jackson. And he actually says that we are capable of helping to accelerate or decelerate like natural processes. And that's something that I always take with me, because I think that it is a relationship and it is a dynamic that if we're actually aware of it, we can create beautiful things. And collaboration for me has been also key, because like, for example, Erin has so much knowledge that is so different from the one I have, but together imagine like what can that make to a landscape. And now imagine like all of the other engineers and scientists that make like mycologists that make part of our projects. Like it make every landscape, it allows us to make landscapes to be more efficient and to help them to accelerate or decelerate processes, as David Jackson says. So I just wanted to add that. And thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Isabel and Erin, for this introduction to your experience and in the residency and to your work. I just wanted to, before we move on to Rachel and Isabel De Obaldía to speak about their experience, I just want to connect to what you're saying. It resonates so much with why I wanted to have this panel today, and to discuss, to talk about how if the planet is a garden and the tropics are a part of that garden and we are the humans caring for it, what kind of collaborations, what kind of relationships do we want to build up in order to create more care for this garden, for the tropics, in this relationship between the global north and the global south, in the words of Tony Coates, how the wealth and the capacity to do things, the agency that we have is not well distributed, given that all the diversity exists in the tropics. How can we create, what kind of relationships can we build upon? And here's just a big, beautiful nursery of those possibilities, I feel. Just to then connect now back to Rachel and the diversity of bats and work that Rachel Page and their Bat Lab are doing, and the collaboration that took place with the artist Isabel De Obaldía. If you want to speak to that, please.
Absolutely. Just did want to start off by saying what a experience this was, and thank you for this invitation and for putting it together for us. So I'd second everything that was said already, and I won't go into too much detail about all the components that I agree with so much. The 100 years of science in this one amazing island, dense with rainforest. What we do is we study bats, tropical bats, and we're looking at how they use their senses, how they use their cognitive skills to navigate the world around them. And we often do this in really detailed ways, like we look at the specifics of echolocation, for example, or social learning, one bat to another bat. So we get really wrapped up and super excited by these very, very directed questions. And we have researchers coming from really all over the world to study this forest, to study these crazy animals that inhabit this forest. And I think that one thing that really struck me from this collaboration, so we all spent 2 weekends together on BCI, and it really sort of reminded our whole Bat Lab team, like having these really fun collaborations with this group of artists, and especially Isabel, just the wonder of these sensory worlds. Like we would go out at night into the forest, we would net these bats, and they would be seeing this whole experience with totally fresh eyes, and also eyes that were like not the same, like very, sometimes overly focused scientific eyes that we have. And it really was wonderful. So I feel like that was a gift. It was great. And in our side, Isabel and I already have plans to keep on going for hopefully another year, if not more, of art science collaborations within the Bat Lab. So this was really an extraordinary thing. And I feel like I did want to touch a little bit on the situation that Panama is in right now, that there's a huge focus, actually massive public focus on biodiversity and the value of biodiversity, and this extraordinary outpouring of support for how important natural resources are and preserving them in the face of tremendous challenges with mining industry and how that's unfolding. So I think that it really, like this intense and very deliberate appreciation and looking at the biodiversity that Panama has, I think it's very timely as well. So anyway, I'll stop there. I'll turn it over to Isabel, but I just wanted to say that it was unexpected what came out of this residency, and I was very grateful to be part of it.
Hi. Yes, I was. I totally agree. It was a wonderful experience. I am fascinated by the nature in general, the bats in this moment, and working with Rachel and meeting all the Smithsonian Bat Team Lab is fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to keeping on working because I feel like I have so much to learn. And yes, Rachel just touched on something that is very important to us in Panama right now with the problem with the mining. And I am very impressed by been going to a few of the marches, and so many young people are protesting, but in a very peaceful way. There is obviously the problems with the circulation and all the things that are going on at the same time. But the few times that I've gone to, one of the biggest ones was I was so impressed by such young people with their banners and saying about nature, and so that is very hopeful for Panama that we can preserve. And anyways, but I'm really looking forward to going back to Barro Colorado, to going back to Gamboa, to keep on working with bats and learning about them more. There are extraordinary creatures, fascinating. I feel my little take, which I've been saying, is that I realize I talk about people in general that I'm learning about bats and working with Stry with Rachel and the whole team. And yes, they're interested, but they don't. There's a lot of rejection towards these animals. So I feel that maybe if I learn more and work more and talk about it more to the public in general, they will see the advantages and the beauty that they contribute to nature too. So it's all together. It's been a wonderful residency in that sense that we got to meet all of these people and scientists, and I'm super fascinated also by the scientists themselves, and all the work that you do. So that's my take.
I'd like to bring Tova into the conversation because she was there with us both weekends at Barro Colorado, and she's the one that captured the images and the feeling of that experience for those of us who had the fortune to be there. Maybe, Ela, we have time to even show the video to those who joined us. But Tova, you could introduce it and talk about your experience traipsing around after us, climbing water towers and going through thickets and around the island in crafts.
Yeah, it's so wild to look back on right now because I just moved. I've been living in Panama for the last 6 years, and I just moved to Texas. And so I'm just like remembering that we were in this space. This space feels so surreal to consider now. The island in the middle of the canal, I talk about it here, and it's like unfathomable to people. And I think I've gotten to see the trajectory of lab as well, of the art and science lab experience. And when Ela had this idea, and it was something so unheard of and bizarre, and now it's so central to the conversation about communication and the urgency. I think the urgency of the moment we're in really is kind of embracing the art and science collaboration. And this, for me, just seemed to be, I think the experience of the artists like immersed so deeply in the space, like the scientific research base, was huge, like a game changer as far as like our approach creating the Art and Science Lab and residency. And just watching all the different conversations come up. I was kind of trying to be in 3 places at once between the different teams. And I guess in the end, from like the full picture, making the video that we can share, or that you can go online and see, it was really easy in the end because all the stories, everyone's research is so connected. And so it all just kind of really like merged together in a way that I haven't experienced very often editing videos. Yeah, I'm glad to be a part of this still from afar, and also just, I mean, it's going off of the back conversation. I've landed in Austin, Texas, where there's bats all around us as well. It is funny. There's a lot of crossover between these 2 places.
Thank you, Tova. And we can watch your wonderful video, and we can watch also, well, general experience of the residency when you visit the site that I've put in the chat. And I would like to also give a chance to Olivia to speak to her experience. She created really wonderful audio stories. Olivia, would you like to share a little about your experience of putting those audio pieces together, which are also on the website?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for inviting me. I have a bit of a science background, and I'm sort of transitioning into a more creative space, working in communications and journalism. So I feel like this was a really interesting and enriching experience for me to be able to kind of like navigate that a bit of a transition, but also sitting in that intersections. And I just learned so much from the artists and the scientists through the residency and through seeing the final exhibit, and also the interviews that I did throughout the process. I don't really have a ton to add, but I just wanted to point out one thing that really stuck out to me that I heard a couple different times, but specifically with my conversation with Carolina, which you can hear on the website, as she mentioned the kind of parallels that she had noticed and that were kind of forthcoming to her through like the creative process and the scientific process. Like you kind of do all this background work, you start with an idea, but you really don't know where that idea is going to take you. And so, yeah, I think it was really enriching and really eye-opening to kind of see the way that a lot of these like we all kind of have the same questions of like, well, what does this last 100 years mean? What does it mean looking into the future? But just with like very different tools to go about answering those questions. And also one thing that Hernan said, you can also hear in the stories, that Klaus also brought up, and a couple of people have brought up, is the idea of time being so important in, honestly, like the science and as well as the art. Hernan spoke about how, you know, what they're doing now in BCI is intergenerational collaboration. And that really kind of stopped me in my tracks, this idea that, you know, you can collaborate with people throughout space, you know, in Panama and Germany, around the world. But these scientists are also thinking about collaborations through time, and thinking about, you know, how can we best prepare ourselves and our work for collaborators in the future. And I think for me, like another really enriching part of this exchange and experience was intergenerational collaboration and like friendship. Like I'm in my early 20s, just graduated from school. And so being able to experience and take part in just a wealth of knowledge from people from all around the world in different stages of their life was, I think, also really powerful and a really enriching part of the experience for me as well. So yeah, I've been thinking a lot about time, thinking a lot about, you know, collaboration and how, you know, when I entered this exchange, I thought that, you know, I the more like creative side of myself and the scientific side of myself, I didn't really know how to reconcile them. So for me personally, coming out of this exchange, I feel like those two parts of myself have really become like linked in a way that's been really, really exciting and invigorating. So yeah, I'm really grateful to have taken part in this experience and learned from you all. So thank you again.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you for those beautiful sound stories. They're really wonderful. Would anyone like to add something? Beth, yes, please.
Well, I want to thank everyone again. This was really an experiment. It's the first time that we've done anything like this on this scale. And I think one of the things that we haven't talked about necessarily yet here is the colonial history of Barro Colorado, and the fact that Barro Colorado is an island in the Panama Canal, and it was founded more or less by biologists from the United States, but in Panama. And it's really changed drastically since I first came here. I first came here in 1992. And at that time, it was mostly scientists from the US and Europe who were working on the island. And now it's just changed radically. There are so many scientists who are from not only Panama, but around Latin America. In fact, scientists from about 50 different countries work at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute now. And that's been a huge change. And I felt like the presence of Estudio Nuboso in the exhibit that we did really brought the whole history right into the present, because the exhibit has the history of Barro Colorado, the colonial history. But in Carolina's videos, for example, you could see people doing the work now, and you could see, who they are, and that it really is a wide variety of people. And also in Tova's video and Tova's pictures, it brought the exhibit into the present, so that people who go to the exhibit can see who's actually doing this work now, and that it is people of a wide variety of ages and origins. And I think that's really an amazing part of the story of Barro Colorado Island. It still isn't perfect. I think we still have things to work out about our how this transition is happening. But I felt like the Estudio Nuboso residency really helped show the current situation of the island and who's working there. And I wanted to thank you for that also.
Our pleasure, Beth.
Thank you, Beth.
Emily, do you want to add something as a facilitator of this residency? Because we co-designed it, but ultimately Emily led it on the ground. Would you like to add something? I have a small other question and brainstorm for everybody on this call after that. But Emily, if you want to add something.
I think I may have been jumping ahead to your question, but sure.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
No, I'm happy to share. I mean, so many things happen when you just open yourself to an experience. And I think we all felt that. The artists who were there, is that many of us had already been to Barro Colorado as tourists or as students in a class trip, or but to be there and live the routines of the day and of the forest, and the howler monkeys and the bats, was to experience not just Barro Colorado, but Panama, where we all live in a different way, and to deepen our connection and our affection and our sense of responsibility towards the tropical forest, which is very easy here in the urban environment to have on the other side of a fence or at the end of a car ride into the interior or something like that. And so I wanted to jump to this idea of bridging the knowledge and in a sense, the exploitative use of the forest by the North to a feeling of ownership and responsibility and participation in the South. I'm not expressing it very well, but I think, Beth was touching on it a little bit about those of us who live here, but kind of volunteer these resources that surround us to be studied and used and extracted, in the case of the mines, by others. And so I think it's an interesting time now to reflect on that relationship. And my question was what role art and science can play in raising awareness and empowering and creating change. So I guess that's where I was going with it. It's not so much about my personal experience, but the way the things that you experience continue to mature and lead to other thoughts, which is something we've all shared in this conversation, is that that experience just builds on a deeper, more layered experience of what it is to be here.
And I would just add, like, if you feel, based on the experience that you've already had with this art-science collaboration, if there were certain things that you thought were really great that we'd need more of, or that you wish, or you saw a potential for something more of. And many of you here have origins in the global north, or as Tony says, temperate ecosystems, but are working in the tropics. So you know well both contexts. How do you feel we can create those bridges better, and art and science being a tool, or other disciplines too, because in our work, we're not only working with art and science, we're working with art and generally relationship, the ecology in that expanded way. So the question, like what Emily is posing too, in terms of if it helps to think of it in that way, what is the potential that you see in this, based on something that happened, or that you wish could happen, or that you see could happen, both locally and globally?
The things I was struck with there was that although we were there with 3 partnerships established, so many of the scientists and researchers there were sharing their research with us, and many of them were fellows or PhD candidates, and many of them said, you know, this is wonderful and I want to stay here as long as I can, because when I go back with all of this knowledge and all this information to Chile or Colombia or wherever, I won't be able to move forward with it. There won't be funding, there won't be interest, there won't be a professional trajectory for me. And then we talked with other people who said, oh, the research is done and we want to continue, but we don't have funding. So I guess what I'm coming to is that in the end, it all comes down to money. And the way money is circulated and how its spending is prioritized, I feel that if we could loop more money into science, and that science into how we run our societies, there might be a little bit more of a bridge. So I don't know if those of you who have to write grant proposals all the time want to comment on that.
I think that is always a challenge, is the funding, for sure. And I was thinking this was the art science collaboration was so wonderfully, like, it's amazing how much came out of these 2 very concentrated weekends. And imagine if there was the possibility for longer term interactions. And or like you were saying, Emily, the fact that it was targeted at 3 specific research groups, but just organically spread to conversations with all the different researchers who were on the island at the time. So yeah, I guess it is challenging. And I think this was done on a pretty tight budget as it was, but it would be lovely to have the chance to have this sort of thing continue in the future.
Yeah, and just to speak to the actual artworks that came out of this, from the 3 artists, I think thinking of, just to go back to like the immersivity, like the immersive experience that we created, how that really comes through in the artworks versus past art and science residencies as well. I think like scale was so important to the works, and like placing, how we placed ourselves within these natural spaces, like thinking about Carolina's project of like literally placing ourselves in the future, and Isabel's Isabel Brostella's project, like the scale of it is so important. And I think it so speaks to like the experience of being there, like for these 2 weekends and living the experience on the island. And then Isabel De Obaldía's piece is so immense. Like you really have to experience them in person, which is not something, that's shared in the video or the website so much. And so I think I just like stressing like the importance of how the artwork can kind of create the experience of presence within these spaces. The artists really like pulled us there in a way that I don't think could have happened without the like intensive collaboration and conversations that everyone was having.
Yeah, I find that there's something about our online existences at the moment that is becoming such a norm, and I'm experiencing that being in Berlin, that there's something about also being, even if it's like you said, 2 short weekends, but to have this presence and the intensity of the experience in the moment. And as you scientists know, like you have to be hands-on, you have to be in there. How to create a balance between those. And perhaps what Olivia also said, this intergenerational collaboration or intergenerational research, the idea of mentorship across ecosystems and across experiences and age and time, regarding time doing research or time experience, the length of experience of something is something so valuable. I mean, I think I'm just feeling the strength of this wave of awareness regarding the anti-mining movement in Panama, and seeing how that is so intertwined with, on the global scale, why these mines are coming from Canada to Panama for rare earth or metals that we use for the technology that is driving and is being making this conversation possible. And they're driving the green post-climate or new renewable energy kind of thing, like the irony of all of those things. And where is that? What is our role then of like sharing knowledge? What is the potential that we can have, both on a local scale in Panama, to support the movement of what's happening there and to ride that wave, or if you see that as possible? And I mean, let alone, I know the global question is such a huge one. I just pose it because I'm busy with it. I'm just curious what you feel. And if it's as simple as the things you've already said, like if for you there was something specific about this residency that you felt like that could go further, or just, yeah. That's where my mind is right now. Erin.
I'll start by saying that I think, so in terms of STRI's role in bringing technology and facilities to the tropics and also training scientists, I think STRI is doing a good job at both of those things. And I think something that Emily said is a major problem that I personally don't know how to solve, which is you can train scientists, but if there aren't jobs for them, that's a problem. And I really don't know what the solution to that is. And I don't know that I don't know how STRI can solve that. I shouldn't say I don't know that STRI can contribute to investment in science. And to be totally honest, that I would say that within the United States, there's not enough investment in science, and the same sort of thing is happening. People get PhDs and they can't find a job, and they don't use their PhD for the thing they envision getting. And so I think that's something that is worth thinking about. I have no idea what the solution to that is in this moment, but I think that's a goal worth working towards, is just greater investment in science in general, but particularly in places where severely lacking in jobs and investment in that information. So that's one thing. And I guess maybe tied to that, and also an outcome that I think I would like to see more of from this collaboration that I thought had great value is that I think being in the Canal Museum and looking at watching Tova's beautiful video and all of the art that was produced from this collaboration, and seeing all of that highlighted on social media, for me, I am really struck by how it brought tropical forests to a novel audience, and in some cases that audience is was here, and the tropical forests are here, but they hadn't almost seen the tropical forests. And so then I think that's really powerful. And then the other part of it for me is I think that these artists can do something that at least I as a scientist can't do, which is communicate the intrinsic value of tropical forests and the beauty of it. So I never find that I have the words to convey that to other people, why tropical forests should exist just because they're this beautiful active place with thousands of organisms, and just that I'm doing a terrible job of it right now, but all of these artists' art did convey that, it gave tropical forests a value that's not extractive, because so much of when we talk about why we should care about the forest, it's oh, and these things are important, the fact that there are forests along the canal that supports a $2.5 billion industry. I mean, that's an important thing. And I can talk about fungi and say, oh, fungi are sources of medicines, and they can be used to produce sustainable materials, and they can be used for this, that, and the other thing. But everything that I'm describing is very what we gain from nature and very extractive. And I think that, and I love that the art that came out of this exhibit is not that. It is really about appreciating the forests for what they are, and recognizing that the tropical forests should be preserved and protected just because of their beauty, and not so that we can take advantage of them. Yeah.
I love that, Erin. Thank you. Carolina.
Yes. For me, I think with the Art and Science Lab, there is a connection that has been drawn and has been reinforced with this year's lab. And for me, something I dream in the future is that every scientist team has an artist or a communicator in their team. And so all this interaction that we had for just a short period of time can be can be reinforced, and can be something that is a part of the team, you are doing all this research and all this work, and having someone in the creative side, maybe Olivia is doing this shift from biology to art or to creativity, and to have some kind of link in your teams that can help with that. And for the artist, I think the curiosity and the search of new things is out there. For me, is connecting this with what's happening right now in Panama. For me, it's amazing to see this awakening of the conscience of what really matters in Panama. All of us here, we know that the real value of Panama, the real gold, is its nature. And I think with this awakening of being against mining, that has a lot of things mixed together, but I think it's a really good opportunity to foster and to continue to give the tools and the information to the general public, to continue valuing and protecting our natural resources. So that's my view.
That would be a dream, I think. I love that dream. Because one of our goals with the Art and Science Lab was always to not make art utilitarian to the science, like that the art is to communicate the science only, but actually that there is a conversation, and that in fact to promote the idea that the artist can actually, and do, depending on the collaboration, influence and support the research questions that the scientists have, or that is a possibility just because of the nature of how artistic research happens and the freedom that the artistic space can offer people in science and in other disciplines that perhaps have very strong rules about how to go about doing things. So yeah, one thing I thought of was regarding the research, the public outreach aspect in science that is always kind of a thing that needs to be fulfilled and often ends up in journals or in certain venues that could also be used through art. And also my other question is often this institutional collaborations that scientists already have. They're working with universities and institutions in different parts of the world, and perhaps those institutions also have interest in collaborating with the cultural with culture or the arts in those institutions, and how those bridges can also be built on. But does anyone else have a wish or dream? We have 7 more minutes on the call, and I would love to also invite anyone who's listening, if you have questions, to also pose them to the panel or join in.
Well, this isn't a very clear dream. I feel like Erin, in the sense that, I have such a deep feeling about why we do this work that it's hard to express it in words sometimes. But I feel like I hope that all of the public outcry right now results in some learning about how forests work. And I feel like art is a really important place for that. I was just thinking of the fact there are a lot of teachable moments that are popping up. Like the other day, I saw an AI generated artwork of a sloth on a tree in front of the mining site, or the hole in the ground. And the sloth had five or six toes, I don't remember. And one of the biologists who saw this on a chat said, hey, sloths in Panama have 3 toes or 2 toes, that they never have 5 toes. And, I'm really kind of hoping that this results in, well, I mean, I think it gives biologists an opportunity to work more closely with people to begin to address a kind of some educational opportunities that we have. And STRI actually does have a fairly good, very good outreach public education program too. And no one's really represented from that group here. But I hope we can, I guess my dream is for people to translate their love for nature into some really deep understanding, the kind of deep understanding that we get in 100 years of science, and that we can begin to see that more, because it's going to take that time, that kind of deep understanding, to really achieve conservation goals. And I think what the Smithsonian tries to do is provide scientific information that informs conservation. And I hope that we can help people learn to take advantage of what's out there. And I think art is the perfect way to make it easier and not make it seem so foreign, because science is often expressed in almost a foreign language.
Thanks, Beth. Well, unless someone else would
I'd
like
like
to
to
speak.
say something.
Yes, please.
I love what Beth just said about teachable moments. I think this is a great opportunity. I would like to see somebody make a collection of the signs that people have made, either the originals or just photos of them. There are lots out there. This is an important moment that's going to redefine how Panama thinks of itself. That's one thing. Whether it's a museum or a visitor center or whoever it is, just somebody who likes collecting things, it doesn't matter, but that's really important. Putting those together will continue to have an impact and showing them. That's the role of visual art. These signs, they're handmade, they're on bits of cardboard, they are art, they are street art. And one of the things that's been key in these protests, to me in some cases, have been some of the rap songs. The words are extraordinary. You've also had songs sung in decimas. So there's all kinds of extraordinary artistic expressions coming out. These are teachable moments. Another element is the need for critical thinking, joining the dots. Why are we doing this? What's going on? Where does it come from? I think the more that, and I suspect there's a whole element that came out in the weekends that you had together that included what one could describe as critical thinking. I don't know, I wasn't there, but obviously the relationship between different disciplines leads to thinking about what you do in a different way, reframing it. And that's, to me, part of what critical thinking is about, not just accepting things at face value. Another reflection is that to come out of the crisis that Panama's in right now, we are really going to have to think together, and we're really going to have to think out of the box. And I find it extraordinarily encouraging to hear the different views and the way people are reacting and the way that people on this exchange are talking about this, because this is not going away. And at the moment, it's not at all clear how, when this is going to get resolved. So people sharing, people being willing to change, being willing to work together, to think and to act in a cross-disciplinary way and talk with people they've never spoken with before, is going to be part of any process that will lead to not a solution, it's not going to get solved, to a lessening of the tension and a new way of relating to each other, socially, politically, relating to nature. There are all kinds of hopeful possibilities, but we haven't yet figured out how we're going to get there. And so the whole process that's been described here has all kinds of teachable moments, as Beth mentioned. And I love the idea that STRI is willing to help. Individual scientists are willing to help, putting ideas on the table, taking part in these discussions, because we need everybody who cares to be on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Isabel, tú querías mostrar algo. You wanted to show something.
Bueno, sí, casual. I actually wanted to show, now that Charlotte mentioned the pancartas. This is something that I don't know if you can see, but this is something that I saw in one of the
Yeah, we can see.
in the marches, which I thought was beautiful.
Mhm.
Anyways, I totally agree. There are so many beautiful signs being made that a collection should be made of the photographs of them. Anyway,
Yeah.
that was all.
Thank you. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. I just wanted to mention that this exhibition of the 100-year anniversary of the Smithsonian of the Barro Colorado Island is still on at the Museo Museo del Canal Interoceánico de Panamá in Casco Viejo in Panama City. And Estudio Nuboso is turning 10 years old next year, and we will have a retrospective exhibition of all of our work in the last 10 years, and we will be including the experience of this exhibition and this residency, and perhaps any developments upon it that will happen in the next year or so. That exhibition will open in August 2024, and our objective in this moment is to look back upon the last 10 years of our experience facilitating multidisciplinary exchanges through the Suelo project and also through art and science labs and flash labs and this residency, etc., and start paving a map towards what the next 10 years should look like and how we want the next 10 years to be in our practice. And one of those things is to build upon the networks that connections and relationships that we've built upon so far. We'd like to build a nature culture corridor of collaborations to support existing researchers and organizations that are already doing the work of conservation and restoration and protection of ecosystems in the tropics, and just put our talents at the service of those who are already doing the work on the ground. So we hope that these conversations will continue in the future. And thank you all once again for joining us, and we wish you a beautiful day and evening, and let's keep it going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ella.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Mhm.